Well, we're here at the Academy Sports and Outdoors Rigs and Techniques at the CCA Workbench, Dave.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, a few weeks ago, I was over doing a Sportsman's Adventure episode with my good buddy Mike Avanon from Vindictive Charters. And
the grouper killer.
We were doing some grouper fishing, and I got to say, we missed the spot by 50 feet, he says.
Yeah, and it made a huge difference. I mean, we moved over 50 feet, and
at that point, it was 3 bent rods.
That's it.
Being on the spot is very important.
It's huge.
And that's why you're
a
here.
lot of people don't realize sometimes they'll fish a spot and they don't get right on it, and they'll think, well, there's no fish here, and move on to another one, when in actuality, they just haven't anchored on it correctly.
So, Dave,
Right.
you had some illustrations made.
Correct. We're correct. And what we have here, the first illustration we have is probably demonstrating some of the hardest parts of trying to get on a spot. And what you have up there is you have the boat, and that gray area is your hard bottom, and you got the tide and the wind. And this is a situation where you have the tide and the wind crossing.
And it's one of the most difficult situations to anchor in, because a lot of people don't take into consideration that tide is going to push you to the east. In other
Right.
words, when it's a westbound tide. So what you want to do is you want to anchor up further to the west of your spot and make sure that all that chum and all that scent and everything actually flows to the fish. In other words, you don't want it flowing off into the sand.
Right.
You want to make sure that it goes right into the rock where your fish are.
So let's look at the second illustration.
Yeah, this is wind against tide, which is another kind of a tricky situation.
And it's a real simple fix when you get into this situation. Basically, you just let out a little more anchor rope and get your boat beyond the spot. In other words, you maybe go 100 feet beyond the spot to make sure that all that chum and bait and scent and everything once again is flowing to the fish.
And then the third illustration?
That's the easiest of them all. That's when the wind and the tide are coming out of the same direction. And what I usually do with myself and my boat is I'll get up, say the water's 100 foot deep, I'll get 200 feet past the spot to anchor up. But what somebody doing it in the beginning can do, they can get 300 feet up from the spot, and if they don't quite make it to where they want to be, they can always let out a little more anchor rope to get right where they want to be, right on that spot. When I say right on it, it's a matter of 35, 30, 40 feet, as close as you can get. When those fish are lazy, they don't have to swim very far to eat that bait. You know, it's like I always said, you leave a hamburger on a fat kid's porch long enough, eventually he's going to eat it.
What is your rule of thumb as far as the scope of how much line you're putting out?
As a rule of thumb, it's 3 times the depth of water. So if you're in, say, 100 feet of water, it would be 300 feet, correct.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the anchor. Mike, you are a master at not having to pull the anchor, more importantly. I noticed that you use, what is this, a plow?
This is a plow, right? And this is a great anchor because it'll grab in anything everywhere. The only thing with the plow anchor is you have to make sure, a lot of guys want to take and they want to put their chain right here.
Right.
What you want to do is actually shackle your chain to the back of the anchor. Okay. And then what we'll do is run the chain up to here and use a couple tie wraps or a small light piece of rope or heavy monofilament and tie it off. That way that chain comes off the tip of it like that.
To set it,
right. What that allows you to do, instead of losing your anchor, is this will break free, the chain comes this way,
and
you pull it out
forward,
backwards.
Pulls it out from the front end.
Right, yep.
Okay, so speaking of chain,
yes.
Rule of thumb, doesn't matter what kind of anchor, let's not get into that yet, but
sure.
If we're going to use this plow, how long of chain would we want?
I use 20 feet, and it sounds like a lot, but what happens is a lot of times at the store, you'll get 6 feet of chain, and the boat will be actually pulling on the anchor like this. In other words, the boat's pulling up like this. So the whole anchor slides across the bottom. With the 20 foot of chain, what happens is it actually pulls down on the shaft and it lets that plow do the work that it needs to do.
Wow.
Right.
Just like that.
All right, so
which
Mike,
is what you want.
Let's talk about the other 2 anchors that we have here.
This is a Danforth or a fluke anchor, and it's very popular. Most guys, this is what they're going to have on their boat.
Right.
It's a real simple, easy to use anchor. It'll stick in everything. And this anchor, for some reason, you do hang up in the bottom. It's easy to get it out.
I like it.
That's a good way to start right there.
This is what guys use for sand, grass, right?
Everything.
Just about anything
it'll
will
stick anywhere.
Same applies to the length of chain?
Yeah, absolutely. 20 feet. The length of the chain is the biggest mistake that most people make outside of not having enough anchor rope on the boat when they go to anchor on a spot.
Okay, so this is called a grapple, I guess?
It is. And it has to be rigged the same way as the plow. You have to make sure that you put the
pull point
on the back with the tie wraps to the tip
here.
of it. Absolutely.
And that one just folds all up. So
the thing that I like about this, Mike, and this was a point that you brought up, this can be used on a little boat, you know, even a little skiff. It doesn't weigh much.
Well, you know,
it can be easily stored.
Right, and what some guys will do is they'll actually, like if they're going to the beach or something, they'll have one of these in a bag with a small piece of chain and 30 feet of rope. You can go anchor up on next to the beach or the sandbar. It's nice and easy. It's simple.
All right, so in either case,
Yes,
now
sir.
we've
The
got
pro tip.
300 feet of anchor rope out
Yeah.
because we're fishing in 100 feet.
Absolutely.
Who wants to pull that?
Man,
dude?
I'll tell you what, this is the greatest thing that came along since sliced bread.
Okay, so
This
how's
is
this work?
amazing. So what this is we call it a haul ball. And basically what you do is you take this ring right here, you open it up, and
Right.
you put it around your rope, just like that, okay?
Okay,
Anchor
Once
rope.
that goes over the rope like that,
we're gonna clip the
you
ball.
just clip it just like that. So
right.
what this does, I'll show you right
So
here.
now the rope is going
rope's
through.
over here, right? It just slides right down the rope and
we-
actually catches the anchor.
So we're using the boat and the ball. We throw the ball over into the water, and
Correct.
it's sitting like this. And as we use the boat,
Driving away.
we're driving away, driving past our anchor.
Yep.
Eventually, what
This
happens
slides
is
down.
it hauls it right up the rope, goes through here, and then it ends up, the anchor itself ends up in the ring.
Yeah,
correct?
it actually holds the anchor up on the surface of the water. That way, all you're doing is taking up slack instead of pulling the weight of the anchor, the chain, and everything else. Makes
You know
life great.
What, you guys, Dave, that was better than chicken rigs and knocker rigs.
Yeah, of course.
You know what, Mike? If guys want to come fishing with you, vindictivecharters.com.
Vindictive Charters, yeah. Well, actually, just Instagram, Captain Michael Avenon.
There it is.
That's it.
There it is.
There it is. I just
There it
learned
is, Brie.
so much, you guys. That was awesome. And then the wind and the tide thing, I know that's like #1 question when Rick goes to all of his seminars. People ask it all the time. So learned a lot. Thanks, Mike.